Hello, host Eric here. I was talking with famous people, and I am here talking with Mega Bro about Quirk codes and this notion he has, which is very intriguing. Go ahead, Mega Bro.
My question was, well, I don't understand debate very well, but it looks like if I compare them to the my codes for how thoughts work, then I I might be onto something. Um, I have like the primary quirk code is a three-part quirk code where there's two options that are being compared to each other, and there's a third function that is what I believe in debate would be the vector by which they're compared. So I think it would be comparable to like two like motions with warrants decided by a vector that produces an impact.
Okay, so let's look at an example. It's a really concrete, good example to use. So, yes, the United States should increase its ground troop presence in the Middle East to get rid of ISIS because we have a proven example of how the U.S. can, in fact, with their military, clear a city of militant fighters in that region, and that example is Tigrit, Tikrit, which we cleared out in 2008 or something like that. Or I think that's the example. Let's pretend that's the example. I don't remember the exact example. I think that's it. All right. So in that example, you've got a central. Remember that anytime you're having a debate, you have to have a resolution. If you don't narrow down what it is you're talking about to a resolution of some sort, whether it's we should get pizza or the United States should increase ground troops in the Middle East to deal with ISIS, you have to have a resolution. So that's step one, right? And then the argument breaks down to yes, we should, because it assumes yes, we need to get rid of ISIS, and then it makes the argument that we're the only ones who can do it, and we know that we're the only ones who can do it. I left out part of the argument actually because in Tikrit, the Iraqi army of the uh, post invasion of Iraq, they needed our help to clear out Tikrit, but we were able to do it. And here's the technique we used, and that's why we need this U.S. technology to use this technique. We're the only ones who can do it. Okay, so that's the argument. So it's kind of a complex set of things, but we have to assume the resolution is set, so we don't have to think about that. With the resolution set, then the real argument there, to sum it up, the tag of it is we're the only ones who can stop them. Okay, the warrant is that uh, a past example has proven that Iraq can't stop them without our help, and that they can stop them with our help. That we can do it. And the reason we know we need to have boots on the ground is because if we use this particular technique that requires boots on the ground. So that's the warrant. The vector is basically saying past example proving both necessity, or trying to prove, doesn't actually prove it, but that's what it's claiming, proving both the necessity that we have to do it and solvency, that if we do it, it'll solve the problem. So I don't I don't know how that breaks down into three things exactly, but it would be
Well, the thing is, there's a hidden a hidden comparison. Like you gave one option and you're deciding it by a vector, but there's a hidden second option that it's being compared against by implication, implying it.
well, it's the status quo. There's always the status quo. So if you're affirming something, you're comparing against the status quo. So you're saying in the status quo, only the Iraqi army is trying to deal with this. This was back when we had this topic, okay? And they can't do it. They're failing. And here's a past example of them failing. Here's a past example when they were failing, we came in and solved the problem with them, and it worked. And so that's why we should do that again rather than the status quo, which is not doing that.
Hmm.
See,
Well, depending on how you're framing it, it could be like either TE or FE as your proposition. Either this is going to be effective or we should all do this, TE and FE. And you're comparing it against the status quo, that would be like either SE or SI, depending on how you look at it. And you're judging that by SI, which is this historical frame. I don't know, this historical frame you're comparing it to.
okay. I mean, the thing is, I like the idea of coming up with a code to explain a three-thing code like that a lot. I don't think it's going to line up with cognitive functions particularly well, or if it does, I don't think it's going to be very meaningful. It might be if you say, if you could correlate it well enough, you could say, well, that's an FE argument, so um, it requires TI support and TE, blah blah blah. You know, but see, then you're talking about the requirements of debate. So in requirements for affirmation in debate, you're talking about number one, inherency. That means prove that there's a problem that we ought to do something about. That means you need to establish that the problem's not going to solve itself. So a problem like little Johnny is too short to ride this ride is not a problem we need to address because little Johnny will be tall enough in a month or two. We don't need to do anything because there's no inherency to the problem. It goes away by itself. Another kind of problem that's not inherent, has no inherency, is if you say, "I know how to solve crime. Everybody just be cool from now on." The reason that lacks inherency is because there's no barrier to that in the status quo. You're not actually doing anything. So that's an inherency requirement before you can affirm something, is to show that there is in fact a problem that we ought to do something about. And number two is solvency. You've got to prove that the thing you're suggesting we do actually is going to solve the problem. So most of the time, arguments are going to land on one of those two areas, is inherency or solvency. The third area that arguments can land in is topicality. And that then you say, well, you're right about everything you say here, but it's not topical. So the fact um, that we should send library books to the Middle East as a way of improving their understanding of the world so that they don't attack us so much, that may be a good solution to ISIS, but it doesn't answer the question, should we attack ISIS with ground troops? It provides an alternate approach to dealing with ISIS, and it's not exclusive either. So it's like you can perm that, as it said. You can permute it, which is, well, let's send the library books and attack them. So, there's topicality issues, right? Those are the three main issues you have to assume, you have to deal with before anything else happens. Is AF either makes arguments that are about topicality, either for their side or against the other guys, uh, either makes arguments about inherency, like describing what a big problem it is, how much significance it has that we deal with it. And other kind of inherency arguments are what will happen if we don't do anything. Bad impacts of leaving the status quo alone. That's another inherency argument, right? And then the last kind of argument is solvency. The thing I'm going to advocate for is going to solve the problem. So really, I guess that's what all kind of arguments fall into one of those three categories, except for what you would call meta framework arguments that say, okay, well, even though the resolution is supposed to be this, we really ought to vote for me because I'm talking about something really important in the real world rather than just this debate round. We're not just debating a topic here. I'm telling the story of a disabled person, and this story needs to be told. And by having me win this debate round and go further on, then you ensure the story be told. And these pre-fiat impacts outside of the topic, non-topical impacts, are what you should vote on. That's like a framework kind of argument. That's the fourth kind. But really, those are the four kind of arguments. They're going to land in one of those terrains.
Okay. I can see how a debate that's supposed to be meaningful would have to cover a lot of that ground. Um, I believe the inherency one would be like one of the first parts you should do, at least by the way the sound of it, and that would actually be one of the feelings. Any of the four feeling instincts would be related there. In order to have it enough
Yeah,
emotional charge to be people can be concerned about.
right. You're
So
right
you'd
about
have
that. But but
so either
but but not about. But that doesn't necessarily apply to the problems with the status quo left being left alone. Like if you're trying to argue a mechanism argument, the impacts are going to be on the F thing, but you're still going to have to go through TI or something like that, right? Some sort of mechanism to explain it. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
right. So you'd have to establish inherency using some sort of feeling, and preferably compared to some other feeling to prove that this value is more important than that other value before you continue further. So that'd be like a feeling compared to a feeling with something as, I don't know what vector you'd decide by.
Yeah.
Then
Well,
you'd
go ahead. I'll think about
and
that. You go
you
ahead.
for what was that? And there's another one. You said it was like solvency.
Yeah, solvency. See, there's a difference between we need to do something, that's inherency, and we need to do my thing, that's solvency. My plan is going to solve this problem. I just described to you a problem. My plan is going to solve it.
Hmm. So that sounds a little bit more general than I thought it sounded at first. At first, I thought it just sounded like TE, but I guess there could be a mix of stuff in there.
It's an impact. It's an impact calculus competition. So after you've established inherency, that yes, something needs to be done about this. It's not going to solve itself or whatever. Then you establish, I'm going to improve the situation. You don't have to actually solve it, but it's called solvency because you're going to improve the status quo. In the status quo, this many people are dying a year. If we do what I say, we predict that this many fewer people will die a year. It's one kind of impact calculus you could be doing. It's just straight up impact calculus like that, right? And then your opponents can say, no, because you're not factoring in this disadvantage from your plan. It will do what you say, but it'll also kill all these people over here. You haven't factored that in. And here's why. Um, or they could simply say, no, your analysis is wrong. Your proposed action will actually cause the opposite impact. You can attack that any way you want, but there's a lot of different ways you can attack it. But the point being that they're establishing that in that instance that we should do some specific kind of impact. There's another way you can approach it. You could say we have to do this because it's the morally right thing to do. You could do a binary kind of an impact and say, look, if we win our comparison to a model, and the comparison to a model would say, okay, well, we should use the natural rights framework. Then you got to win that framework argument, and you compare to the model, and you say, and therefore we should do what I say because it's morally obligatory, and what my opponents are arguing is wicked. You can make that kind of an argument too. So it is complicated, but there are a finite number of vectors. And I think the list I have on the video that's on warrants and vectors that's up there is pretty good starting spot. I'm trying to narrow it down as much as possible.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I can see that it looks like the ultimate goal of arguing about solvency is an argument about what TE we should do, for the most part. But there's a whole lot of ways you could argue it, and a TI user would probably make the best arguments. So it's kind of weird when you think about it. You got TI talking about TE.
Right. But the thing is, sometimes people don't even make those kind of arguments. Sometimes people just say, um, we should affirm this resolution. Some people run an AFK and say, this resolution is fundamentally bad, okay? So the way to show this is to vote for our conscientious objection to the AF resolution, even though we're the affirmative. we deny any need to show inherency, except we show inherency that the resolution itself is bad. And we deny any need to show solvency, except that voting for us solves the problem by punishing the debate gods for making this resolution. And people make those kind of arguments too in policy debate. So, I mean, it's called an AFK, an AF critique, where you say, I refuse to affirm this and I'm going to do something else instead, and you should still vote for me. It's ridiculous. I mean, I think those arguments are fucking ridiculous. And I will vote on T. I tell them, I warn people, I will vote on T. That means I will vote on topicality. If they say that's not topical, I will vote on that. So don't try to run that shit in my debate round unless you got it fully shelled out. You got to have all the fucking shell in place, the alternative, you got to have everything. So then, and if you do and you argue, well, fine. I mean, I do sometimes vote on Ks, but I don't like it. I like topical shit. So, I mean, those arguments are enabled when you have non-policy debate. You're almost always talking about topical stuff, usually. And in that instance, there is a lot of TE, but on neg, there's a lot of TI that says it's just dismantling it, right? It's not providing necessarily any positive alternative. And in fact, in some debate formats, neg is not supposed to offer counter plans. So I think it's TE versus TI. AF is TE, neg is TI. I didn't realize
kind of
that
look
before.
at it. You could kind of look at it like that, yeah.
Because AF's advocating that we do something specific to solve some specific problem, and neg is saying, let's talk about it some more. I have more arguments to make. I think we should chat about this a little longer before we take any sort of action. You action people. Yeah. So I think that's why I say people are born either neg or af. That must be what I mean. Is they're born with TI conscious or TE conscious. Some people are naturally, they just want to negate. Some debaters just want to negate. Some debaters want to affirm. They just get more intuitively what it means to affirm or to negate.
Well, you could ask TI if you're saying that, hey, this framework is right. When you could neg TE by saying, hey, we can't do anything new.
Okay, you're right. You could run a neg case entirely out of unintended consequences. You could say, the status quo is perfect. Okay? And any action we take will make things worse. And then you have to do a bunch of TE analysis on neg, right? Analyzing these algorithms, how they work to with these various factors to produce these outcomes, and why these outcomes are bad. And then on AF, you could argue, not neg. I think that AF argument is basically we have to do something, which is the fucking worst argument in history, right? We have to do something. No, not necessarily. Yes, there's a problem. Doesn't mean we have to do something, right? It's like the lady who got the lightning detectors installed in Florida parks. Yes, your kid was struck by lightning while playing softball. Yes, it was very tragic. Yes, she was in a vegetative state and then died. No, that doesn't mean we need to install lightning detectors in parks. Can you imagine?
There's another layer here. It's not just arguing for TE. It's arguing for FE that argues for TE. This is confusing, man.
It's not that confusing if you don't have the cognitive function element involved in it. It's pretty straightforward then.
True.
Well, yes, but what about the children, Saren asks, and I think that's wise to ask that. What about the children? Well, the children get both the TE and the TI. And you know what? They're like vitamins. They help them grow up big and strong.
Vitamin TE.
Yeah,
I think that's Adderall.
You're right! It is. It's either vitamin TE or vitamin SE. It's one of the two, or a combination of both of them. There's some solvency in that shit. That's TE in a bottle. Hell yeah. That's brilliant, Mega Bro. All right, let's
Well,
end this episode. Oh, go ahead. You got more? Let's hear
I was gonna see if we could make any more jokes.
it.
What is marijuana?
Oh, let's see. I think marijuana is NI.
Vitamin Ni. Ah, I see everything, man. It all fits together.
No, I mean, you're able to focus on one possible. Like when I smoke marijuana, it makes me more able to focus on one possibility and less prone to having myself get split off. And I see the Mexican not host Marcus here. He probably wants to talk to Puesto Enrico. But anyway, it makes me more able to focus on one thing and less inclined to want to think about other possible paths. That's my experience with it. I don't know if that makes it NI or if it makes it maybe it moves in lower in the stack or something. You know?
Not sure.
And then I would say alcohol. Alcohol
You know
is
what? Before we get to alcohol, I'm thinking maybe it reduces anxiety, which would be reducing FUM. That would reduce Enneagram 6.
but it doesn't though. In fact, it used to make me quite anxious, but I'd smoke it anyway.
Oh.
It doesn't reduce anxiety for me. It doesn't increase anxiety anymore either. But it just it just makes me less scattered, or it makes not scattered. It makes me less impatient. So it helps treat the ADD a little bit, ADHD a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, that's tricky.
I mean, it could be.
Oh. We should sometime talk about cybernetics, cybernetic feedback loops. That would be more like reducing the effect of positive feedback loops in cybernetics. It would
Uh,
make you not try and start new stuff as much.
right. It increases your SE in some ways. Anyway, I think alcohol though. Alcohol is. Hmm.
That would decrease your negative feedback loops, so you aren't as inhibited.
Yeah. But it has a lot of different effects, kind of. I mean, it suppresses the impatience of any, but it doesn't suppress any at all. It makes it stupider. It makes FE stupider. It makes TI doesn't really affect TI that much, but it makes it a little stupider, and it makes SI a disaster. For me, that's my experience with it. So I don't know. It's just like fuck everything up. It's like not even cognitive function related. It's just it's FI. Here's some nice FI in exchange for everything else. That's what it is. Here you can have good FI. Now I get everything else. And you're not gonna have good FI in the morning. That's my experience with it. Oh,
Well,
I've solved my feelings.
I I sometimes use it depends on how I'm framing it, but pure FI, I wouldn't say that's what it's related to. It could be a mixture FI where it's like some of the lower feelings are channeling up through it.
You know what? Now that I think about it, you're right. It's SI body feeling plus access to FE that links it to FI, so that you feel the FE more strongly, uh, rather than more abstractly in the status quo. I think that's how it works. Something like that. It's the SI part of it that makes it so dangerous for the ENTP, because it we don't do well with our body in the moment and space, our identity in the moment and time. We're impatient. It's like, let me watch TV. I used to, well, since I quit drinking, I haven't been able to sit down and watch TV without getting up 50 times in the course of one show. Just smoke a cigarette or whatever. I get impatient. I can watch YouTube videos, some of them. I watched this weird YouTube video this morning by this lady named the Overly Emotional Female, who commented on the INFP video. I like her a lot. She's funny. She's it's kind of like seeing inside out me when I watched her talk in this one video about you. This analogy she makes between a aquarium filter and emotions, and watching her kind of peel off into little riffs here and there and stuff, but not nearly so expressively or excessively as ENTP or ENFP might. It was a nice experience to watch it. It's weird. You experience different types differently when you experience them as video makers than when you experience them as human beings in the world, and you get a different perspective on them. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What were we talking about?
Well, first we were talking about quirk codes and debate. Then we were talking about debate. Then we were talking about cognitive functions. Then we were talking about
Drugs.
Substances.
Drugs, right. Yeah, I think that the drugs that really correlate with specific functions are going to be your uppers and your downers. Like, your speed is going to be correlating with getting shit done. And yeah. Okay, well, let's end this video and let's start a new one. I gotta open this garage door. It's a million degrees in here. And I start to get hot at 500,000 degrees.